a pie, a ledger, a woman who had learned to measure her worth in other people's numbers, a door that closed in her face on a Tuesday morning in October, and the particular way she stood on the steps afterward, not crumpled, not weeping, just still, the way a tree goes still in the moment after the wind has passed through it and before it decides what shape it will hold for the rest of the season. A man behind a desk who believed he was being reasonable. He was wrong. There is a kind of arithmetic that looks like wisdom and functions like a cage. I have told enough stories in my time to recognize it on sight. The careful counting of what a person lacks, the tidy columns of absence, the ledger that records every deficit and leaves no line for the things that cannot be quantified. A woman's stubbornness, her particular genius with soil, the way the town had been eating her preserves for 11 years and calling them the best thing that had come out of the county in living memory. None of that fit in a column, so none of it was counted. This is the story of Ruth Calloway, and of what she built in the year that followed a door closing, and of a man named Gerald Fitch who would spend 12 months learning the difference between what he could measure and what was actually true. It begins, as most true things do, with something small. A Thursday morning, a walk to town, a refusal delivered so politely it almost sounded like kindness, almost. Ruth Calloway had lived on the Calloway property outside Harlan, Colorado, for 31 of her 44 years. She had arrived as a bride at 13 acres of rocky, high-altitude farmland that her late husband Thomas had inherited from a father who had not quite known what to do with it either. Thomas had been a good man, patient, funny in a quiet way, fond of dogs and bad weather and the particular satisfaction of a problem solved with the right tool rather than the easiest one. He had died of a fever 3 winters ago, in the way that fevers sometimes took people in the mountains, quickly, without ceremony, without the dignity of a long farewell. Nora had buried him on the eastern slope where he had always said the light was best in the mornings, and she had gone inside and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. And then she had gotten up and fed the animals, because the animals did not know about grief, and the morning did not wait. She had managed the property alone since then. This was not remarkable to her. She had always done most of the managing. Thomas had been the muscle and the optimism and the willingness to try a thing before it was proven sensible, and she had been the planning and the patience and the knowledge of what the land would and would not forgive. Together they had been sufficient. Alone, she was sufficient in a different way, quieter, more deliberate, stripped of the particular luxury of having someone to think out loud with. She missed that most of all. Not the companionship, though she missed that too, the thinking out loud. The way a problem got smaller when you handed half of it to someone else. Not because they solved it, but because they held it with you for a while. The 13 acres had become 17 by the second year after Thomas died, when old Prentice Hale on the adjacent parcel had decided his knees were done with Colorado winters and had sold to Nora at a price that was fair and which she had managed by selling 2 seasons of preserved goods in advance to the hotel in Harlan and the dry goods concern in Pueblo that had been asking for them for years. She had not borrowed to do it. She had not needed to. But the greenhouse was another matter. The greenhouse had been Thomas's idea first, mentioned on a winter evening about 6 months before he got sick, in the way he mentioned ideas, not as plans but as possibilities floated into the room to see if they had any lift. A glass and timber structure on the south-facing slope, large enough to start seedlings through the cold months, to extend the growing season by 6 weeks on either end, to produce the kind of early spring vegetables that the hotel in Harlan paid a premium for because they could not get them anywhere else until June. Nora had taken the idea and done what she did with all ideas. She had set it aside and turned it over for a season, examining it from different angles, checking it against the land and the light and the numbers. And by the time Thomas died, she had already concluded that it was not just a possibility. It was the right next thing. The land was telling her so. The soil on the south slope had been telling her for years that it wanted more work done to it, more attention, more purpose. She had the plans drawn by a man in Pueblo who built such structures. She had priced the timber and the glass. She had calculated the return against the investment across 3 years, then 5, then 10, accounting for bad seasons and good ones and the middle kind that make up most of a life. The numbers were sound. She knew they were sound the way she knew when bread was ready, not from a clock but from a knowledge that lived in the hands and the nose and the accumulated weight of years of paying attention. She had walked into the First Territorial Bank of Harlan on a Thursday morning in October, carrying her plans, her figures, her deed, and 11 years of spotless account records. And she had sat across the desk from Gerald Fitch, who was 38 years old and had been the bank's senior lending officer for 4 years, and had grown up in Harlan and knew perfectly well who Nora Calloway was. He had looked at her figures for a long time. He had asked about collateral. She had offered the land. He had asked about income continuity. She had shown him 11 years of records. He had asked whether she had a male cosigner who could be named on the loan. The room had been very quiet for a moment. She had said, carefully and without heat, that she did not, and that she did not believe one was required by the terms of the bank's lending policy as she understood them, and that she would appreciate his reading her figures again with attention to the 5-year projection on the 3rd page. He had read it again. He had set it down. He had told her, in the tone of a man who believes he is being helpful, that the bank had concerns about the viability of agricultural ventures of this scale operated without a... He had paused here, choosing his word. A primary manager with demonstrated experience in large-scale capital projects. Nora had looked at him for a moment. She had said, very quietly, that she had been the primary manager of the Calloway property for 11 years, that the property had not missed a payment in that time, that it had expanded by 4 acres, and that she was the person who had drawn up the figures he was currently holding. He had said he understood that, and that the bank appreciated her business, and that he was sorry. She had gathered her papers. She had stood. She had thanked him for his time, because she had been raised to be courteous even when courtesy cost something, and she had walked out through the bank's glass-fronted door and down the 3 stone steps to the street, and she had stood there for a moment in the October light, the mountains enormous and indifferent above the town, and she had thought a thought she did not permit herself to say aloud, and then she had walked to the dry goods store to collect her order, and then she had driven home. She did not cry about it. This is not because she was not hurt. She was hurt in the particular way of a person who has done everything correctly and been told it isn't enough, which is a different and more durable hurt than the kind that comes from failure. Failure you can address. You can find what went wrong and fix it. This kind of hurt had no mechanism. There was nothing to fix. The problem was not in her numbers. The problem was in what Gerald Fitch saw when he looked at her, and she could not revise that with a better 5-year projection. She drove home. She fed the animals. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had sat the morning after Thomas died, and she looked at her plans spread out before her, and she thought for a long time. The dog, a large brown animal of indeterminate heritage named Clement, settled his chin on her knee and looked up at her with the expression he wore when he had already arrived at the answer and was waiting patiently for her to catch up. She thought about what she had. She thought about what she needed. She thought about the gap between them and how many ways there were to cross a gap. Alone was one way. It was not the only way. She had been thinking about it as the only way because it was the conventional way, the way Thomas would have done it, the way any man with her numbers would have done it and been handed the funds with a handshake and a smile. She had been operating, she realized, inside someone else's framework. She had been trying to solve her problem using the tools that had been built for a different kind of person. She looked at Clement. Clement looked at her. She pulled the plans toward her and turned to a clean page in her ledger and began to write. The idea she arrived at was not complicated, but it required a particular kind of courage that is different from the dramatic kind. Not the courage of a single decisive moment, but the slower, more exhausting courage of asking people for things directly, one at a time, over a period of weeks, without the protection of a bank's imprimatur to make the asking feel official and safe. She was going to fund the greenhouse herself, not all at once, in pieces, through a series of arrangements that she would have to negotiate individually, on the strength of nothing but her word and her record, and the particular reputation she had built over 11 years of delivering exactly what she promised. She wrote down every name she could think of who had benefited from the Calloway property's output. The hotel, the dry goods concern in Pueblo, the Harlan Ladies Auxiliary, which had used her flowers for every significant occasion in the county for a decade, the school, which bought her eggs, the 3 families who had standing orders for her preserves every autumn. She wrote down what each of them had paid her over the past 3 years. She wrote down what she could offer them in return for early payment or advance purchase, guaranteed supply, priority on the spring vegetables, the early strawberries that came off the south slope, and which the hotel's cook, a man named Augustin, had once described as the finest thing he had put in his mouth in 20 years of professional cooking. Then she went to see them, one by one, over the course of November. This is the part of the story that the town of Harlan did not fully understand until later. They saw Nora Calloway making her rounds. They knew she had been to the bank. Word travels in a small town the way weather travels, faster than you expect and arriving from a direction you weren't watching. People knew Gerald Fitch had turned her down. Some of them thought this was reasonable, some of them thought it was a shame. Most of them, in the way of small towns, thought it was probably both and kept their opinions in the middle where opinions are safest. What they did not know, because Nora did not discuss it, was the nature of her visits. She was not asking for charity. She was not describing her circumstances or appealing to sympathy. She was making business propositions, each one tailored to the specific interest of the person she was sitting across from. Each one structured so that the other party received something of clear and demonstrable value in exchange for their early commitment. The hotel got a 5-year supply guarantee on early season produce at a fixed price that was below what they were currently paying a supplier in Denver, who was unreliable and expensive to deal with. The Pueblo dry goods concern got exclusivity on her preserves for their premium line. The Ladies' Auxiliary got first right of purchase on her cut flowers for the next 3 years at current prices, locked in before the general inflation that everyone in the county could see coming in the cost of everything. She was not asking for favors, she was offering value. The distinction mattered to her enormously, and it mattered to the people she spoke with, who were business people and understood value when it was laid before them plainly. By the end of November, she had secured enough in advance commitments to fund the timber. By mid-December, she had the glass ordered from a supplier in Denver who owed her a favor she had never called in. He had once needed a large order of preserved goods for a civic dinner on short notice, and she had provided them without complaint and at a fair price, and he had not forgotten. The glass arrived in January, transported up the mountain road on a clear, cold day when the sky was the particular blue that only happens in Colorado in winter. A blue so sharp it almost hurts to look at it directly. She built the greenhouse herself, with the help of her neighbor's 2 sons, who were 16 and 18 and strong, and who she paid in cash money and in the kind of meals that growing young men remember for the rest of their lives. Clement supervised from a position of strategic warmth near the south wall, occasionally rising to inspect a joint or a pane of glass with an expression of professional assessment. The frame went up in February. The glazing was finished in early March. By the middle of March, the first seedlings were in the ground inside it, and the south slope of the Calloway property was producing in a month when every other farm in the county was still locked under the last of the winter. The hotel's cook, Augustin, came out in April to see it. He stood in the greenhouse for a long time without speaking, which was how Nora knew he approved, because Augustin only went quiet when he was genuinely moved by something. He looked at the rows of young plants, the early lettuces and the radishes and the peas climbing their strings in the warm glass-held air, and he said, without looking at her, that he would need to revise his menu planning for the spring season. She said that was fine. He said he supposed this meant the Denver supplier was finished. She said that was his business to decide. He looked at her then, with the expression of a man who has just understood something he should have understood some time ago. He said he would be speaking to the hotel's owner about expanding the arrangement. She said she would be available for that conversation. He left. She went back to work. Clement watched him go with the air of a creature whose predictions have once again been confirmed. Now, I want to stop here for a moment, if you'll allow me, because I am aware that you have been patient and generous with your time, and I want to acknowledge that. If you are listening to this from somewhere cold, I hope you have something warm to drink. If you are somewhere warm, I hope you are comfortable. Wherever you are, I am glad you are here. If this story is finding you at the right moment, and I believe stories find people at the right moment more often than we give them credit for, I hope you will stay a little longer, because Nora Calloway is about to figure something out. Or rather, someone is about to figure something out about her, and the two things are, in the end, the same event, seen from different windows. Gerald Fitch had been watching. This requires some explanation of Gerald Fitch, because it would be easy and inaccurate to make him a villain in this story, and I have promised you honesty. Gerald Fitch was not a bad man. He was a man who had been trained to see the world in a particular way, and who had, until recently, had no compelling reason to question that training. He had grown up in Harlan, the son of a dry goods merchant, had gone east for 2 years of banking education, had returned and worked his way up through the First Territorial with the patient diligence of a man who understood that institutions reward consistency. He was not cruel. He was not corrupt. He was, in the specific way that causes the most durable harm, thoroughly conventional. He saw the world through the framework he had been given and had never been shown a reason to look for the edge of the frame. He had turned Nora Calloway down because the framework told him to. A widow, no cosigner, agricultural venture, high altitude, weather dependent. The boxes that needed checking had not been checked, and he had followed the framework, and he had told himself, as he told himself in all such cases, that he was protecting the bank's interests, which was his job, which was what he was paid to do. But he had grown up in Harlan. He knew the Calloway property. He knew Nora's preserves. He had eaten them at his mother's table every autumn since he could hold a spoon. He knew her record. And in the weeks after she walked out of his bank, he found that the decision sat with him in a way that decisions usually did not. He was not a man who second-guessed himself. He had built his professional identity on the bedrock of not second-guessing himself, because a lending officer who second-guesses himself is a lending officer who makes inconsistent decisions, and inconsistency was, in Gerald Fitch's framework, the cardinal sin. But he watched. He could not help watching. Harlan was a small town, and the Calloway property was a known quantity, and people talked. He heard about her visits in November. He heard about the advance arrangements she had made. He heard about the glass arriving in January and the frame going up in February. And he felt something he did not immediately have a name for, something that lived in the same neighborhood as admiration and in the adjacent neighborhood as discomfort. He filed it away without examining it, which he was very good at, and went on with his work. Then April came, and the hotel's owner, a man named Bertram Schultz, who had been a depositor at the First Territorial for 20 years, and whose opinion Gerald respected, came into the bank not for a transaction but for a conversation, which was unusual. Bertram sat down across from Gerald's desk and told him, in the direct way of a man who has been in business long enough to dispense with preamble, that he had just signed a 5-year supply agreement with the Calloway property, and that he expected it to change the hotel's food costs by a significant margin, and that he thought Gerald should know, because it would affect the Calloway account in ways that were going to be interesting. Gerald said he was glad to hear the hotel was doing well. Bertram looked at him for a moment. He said, in the same direct tone, that he understood Gerald had declined to finance the greenhouse that was now producing the goods in question. Gerald said that had been a business decision based on the bank's lending criteria. Bertram was quiet for a moment. He was a large man with a white beard and the patience of someone who had survived 30 Colorado winters in the hospitality trade, which requires a specific and formidable kind of patience. He said that he supposed that was true. He said that he also supposed the bank's lending criteria might benefit from a review, given what a woman with no cosigner and no bank loan had just managed to build on a rocky, high-altitude slope in the middle of a Colorado winter. He said it without heat, the way Nora had spoken in Gerald's office, not as an accusation but as a plain statement of observable fact. Then he said good morning and left. Gerald sat at his desk for a long time after that. He thought about Nora Calloway's figures, which he had looked at twice, and which had been, he was now willing to admit to himself in the privacy of his own mind, sound. He thought about the 5-year projection on the 3rd page, which he had read carefully both times, and which had accounted for bad seasons and good ones and the middle kind, and which had been, he was now willing to admit, more thorough than most of the projections he approved. He thought about the question he had asked about a cosigner, and the way she had answered it, not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet precision of a person who is prepared for this question and is disappointed but not surprised to be asked it. He thought about the greenhouse, which he had not seen but which Bertram Schultz had just described as a going concern producing early season goods that the hotel had not been able to source reliably in 20 years of operation. He thought about the framework. He was not, in this moment, a man having a revelation. Revelations are dramatic. This was slower and less comfortable than that. The particular feeling of a man who has been right by the rules and wrong by the reality, and who is honest enough, when forced to be, to know the difference. He sat with it the way Nora had sat with the idea of the greenhouse, turning it over, examining it from different angles, checking it against what he knew and what he had seen, and what was now, undeniably, growing on a south-facing slope 3 miles outside of town. He did not do anything about it immediately. He was not an immediately kind of man, but he stopped filing the feeling away without examining it. He let it sit on the desk of his mind, so to speak, in a pile he would have to address eventually. May came. The Calloway property's early vegetables began arriving at the hotel, and at 3 other establishments in Harlan that Nora had quietly added to her supply arrangements over the winter. The ladies' auxiliary held their spring luncheon, and the centerpieces were Callaway flowers, which they always were. But this year there were more of them, and they were earlier and more various than anyone could remember. The school received its egg order 2 weeks ahead of the usual schedule. The Pueblo dry goods concern placed a larger order for preserves than they had in any previous year, anticipating the autumn production. The town of Harlan began to revise its opinion. This is what small towns do, slowly, collectively, with the particular momentum of a group of people who all arrive at the same conclusion by slightly different routes and then discover, with some surprise, that they have all arrived together. People who had thought Gerald's decision was reasonable began to find it less so. People who had thought it was a shame began to say so more openly. The blunt shopkeeper, a woman named Ida Marsh, who had run the general store for 30 years, and who had the moral authority of someone who has extended credit to half the county and been repaid by most of them, said in the hearing of several people that she had never understood why a woman with Nora Calloway's record needed a man's name on a piece of paper to borrow money, and that she was glad Nora had found a way around the foolishness, and that the bank might want to think about whether its policies were serving the community or only the people the community had always served. Ida was not a subtle woman. She was not trying to be subtle. She was trying to be heard, and she was. Gerald heard. He heard the way a man hears things that confirm what he is already, slowly and reluctantly, concluding on his own, not as new information but as the sound of a door that was already opening, swinging a little wider. He drove out to the Callaway property on a morning in June. He told himself he was making a routine account review visit, which was a thing lending officers did, and which provided a legitimate professional reason for the drive that he was grateful for. He was not yet ready to go without a professional reason. He was still, in June, the kind of man who needed a framework to move through. Nora was in the greenhouse when he arrived. She came out when she heard his wagon, wiping her hands on her work apron, and she looked at him across the yard with an expression that was neither welcoming nor unwelcoming, simply attentive, the way she looked at most things, giving them her full consideration before deciding what they were. He said good morning. She said good morning. He said he was making account review visits and had wanted to stop by. She looked at him for a moment. She said that was fine, and asked if he wanted to see the operation. He said he would appreciate that. She showed him the greenhouse first. He walked through it slowly, looking at the rows of plants, the irrigation channels she had designed and dug herself, the careful organization of the space that spoke of someone who had thought about every square foot and given it a purpose. He did not say much. She did not offer more than he asked for. They walked through in the particular silence of two people who have something between them that has not yet been named. Then she showed him the ledger. She brought it out to the porch and laid it open on the table there, and he sat across from her and read through the past 8 months of accounts, the advance arrangements, the supply agreements, the costs of materials and labor, the revenue projections against which the actual revenue was now being tracked, month by month, in her careful handwriting. He read for a long time. She poured coffee and set a cup near his elbow and did not hover. He looked up eventually, he said, and his voice had a quality it had not had in his office in October, a quality of a man speaking without the protection of his framework, just speaking plainly. He said that her 5-year projection had been accurate. She said she had known it was. He said he thought he owed her an apology. The porch was quiet. The mountains were doing what they always did. Clement was lying in a patch of sun near the steps, and he opened one eye and then closed it again, which was as close to a verdict as he was likely to offer. She looked at Gerald Fitch for a moment. She was not a woman who accepted apologies easily, not because she was unforgiving, but because she took them seriously and believed they required a response of equal seriousness. She said that she appreciated him saying so. He said the bank's lending criteria had not served her well, and that he had been thinking about that for some months. She said she had gathered that from the fact that he was here. He said he wanted to discuss whether there were additional capital needs for the property going forward that the bank might be in a position to address under revised terms. She looked at him again with that attentive, considering expression. She said she would think about it. He said that was fair. She said it was not entirely about the money. She said she had found, over the past 8 months, that there were other ways to fund a project that had the virtue of not requiring her to convince anyone of anything. The arrangements she had made were based on demonstrated value, not on persuading someone to take a chance on her. and she had found she preferred that. He was quiet for a moment. He said he understood that. She said she did not think he entirely did, but that she appreciated him trying. That was honest. He received it honestly. He nodded and finished his coffee and thanked her for her time, and he stood to go, and she walked him to his wagon, and he was about to climb up when he stopped and looked back at her and said, "And this is the line I have been waiting to tell you about, the one that the whole story has been building toward," he said. "I think I came here to ask you something, and I am not sure I have the right to ask it, but I find I am going to ask it anyway." She waited, he said. "Was there a moment when you were figuring out how to do this without the loan, when you thought about giving up?" She was quiet for a long moment. The morning light was doing something complicated with the mountains behind her, the way it does in June in Colorado, turning the snow on the peaks a color that is not quite white and not quite gold, she said. "Every morning for about a week. And then Clement sat on my feet while I was trying to feel sorry for myself, and I couldn't maintain the mood." He looked at Clement, who was now sitting in the yard regarding him with an expression of mild professional interest. Gerald Fitch laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that surprises a man who has not laughed genuinely in some time. He said, "I believe it," she said, and there was something in her voice that was not quite warmth yet, but was the temperature just before warmth. "You can come back, if you want to see how the summer season develops. As an account review, or not as an account review." He said he would like that, she said. "I know." He came back in July. He came back in August. He came back in September when the autumn preserves were being put up and the greenhouse was being prepared for its second winter season. And the South Slope was doing everything Nora's 5-year projection had said it would do in year 1, and rather more besides. He came back not as a lending officer making account reviews, though he sometimes brought paperwork as a kind of talisman against his own uncertainty, but as a man who had found that the 3 miles between Harlan and the Calloway property had become the most interesting 3 miles in his world. They talked. This was, for both of them, the primary thing. Nora had missed having someone to think out loud with, and she discovered that Gerald, stripped of his framework and his professional caution, was a thoughtful person with a genuine curiosity about things, about how they worked, about why people made the choices they made, about what the land was doing and why. He had grown up in Harlan and had somehow never really looked at the country around it, in the way that people who grow up somewhere often don't look at it because it is simply the background of their lives. Nora had been looking at it for 31 years and had things to say about it that he found he wanted to hear. She was not easy. She was not soft-edged or accommodating in the way that some people are when they want to be liked. She said what she thought, directly, without ornament, and she expected the same in return. And when she did not get it, she waited with a patience that was not passive but active. The patience of someone who is giving you time to arrive at honesty and will not pretend you have arrived before you have. He found this, after the initial discomfort of it, to be the most restful thing he had encountered in years. He had spent his professional life in a world where people said things at an angle to what they meant, where the real conversation was always happening slightly to the left of the stated one, and the directness of Nora's kitchen table was like stepping out of a building into open air. In October one year, almost to the day, after she had walked out of his bank, he drove out on a Thursday morning, and she was on the porch when he arrived, as if she had known he was coming, which she probably had, because the pattern of his visits had become regular enough that Clement had stopped barking at his wagon. He sat down. She poured coffee. He set a folder on the table, not a banking folder, just a folder, and said that he had been thinking, and that he had a proposal to make, and that he wanted to make it plainly and without the protection of professional language, and that if she told him he had read things wrong, he would accept that, and they would not speak of it again. She said, "All right." He said he had spent a year watching her build something that he had told her she could not build, and that he had spent that year revising his understanding of a great many things, and that the most significant revision was this. He had thought, when she came into his bank, that he was evaluating a risk. He understood now that he had been in the presence of a certainty, and that the failure of perception had been entirely his. She was quiet. He said he was not asking to be part of the property or the operation. He was not asking for anything that was hers. He was asking whether there was any possibility that she would be willing to let him be part of her life, in whatever form she thought was reasonable, on whatever terms she set, and that he understood if the answer was no, and that the answer being no would not change his opinion of her, which was the highest opinion he held of any person in the county. The mountains were doing what they always do. The light was October light. low and golden, the kind that makes everything look like it has been considered carefully and placed with intention. Nora looked at him for a long time. She said, "I have been waiting for you to ask that since July." He said, "I'm a slow thinker." She said, "I know. I find I don't mind it." He said, "I came here a year ago to tell you I couldn't help you. Now I'm here asking if you'll help me." She said, "That's a fair description." He said, "Is that a yes?" She said, "It is the beginning of a yes. The rest of it will take some time." He said that was fine. He said he had time. She said, "I know you do. You've been coming out here every 2 weeks for 4 months." He said. Clement seemed to expect it. She looked at Clement. Clement looked at the mountains with the expression of a creature who has been vindicated so many times that vindication has lost its novelty. They were married the following spring, in April, in the greenhouse, because Nora said if they were going to do it, they were going to do it somewhere that meant something, and the greenhouse meant something. It was the thing she had built when the door closed, which made it the right place to open a new one. The ladies' auxiliary provided the flowers, which were, of course, Callaway flowers. Augustine cooked. Ida Marsh cried, which surprised everyone, including Ida Marsh. Bertram Schultz gave a toast that was brief and accurate. He said that the Callaway property had been producing the best things in the county for 11 years, and that it appeared to have recently expanded its line. The bank's lending criteria were revised the following year. Gerald did not announce this as a reform or a correction. He simply changed the forms and the process, quietly and without fanfare, in the way that a man makes a change when he has understood something rather than when he wants credit for understanding it. Several women in the county received loans in the years that followed, who would not have received them before. None of them knew why the change had been made. Some of them, if they thought about it, might have traced it back to a Thursday morning in October, and a woman who had walked out of a bank carrying her plans and her figures and her 11 years of spotless records and had gone home and found another way. The greenhouse produced for 30 years. The south slope of the Callaway property became, in time, the most productive small agricultural operation in that part of Colorado, known for its early season vegetables and its preserves and its cut flowers, and in later years, for the particular strawberries that Augustine had once described as the finest thing he had put in his mouth in 20 years of professional cooking, and which he continued to describe that way for the remaining 30 years of his career, by which time it had become a kind of professional motto. Nora and Gerald had 2 children, who grew up knowing how to read a ledger and how to read a landscape, and who understood from an early age that these were not different skills but the same skill applied to different materials. The children grew and had children of their own, and the property passed through the generations in the way that good land passes, not diminished but deepened, carrying the accumulated knowledge of everyone who had worked it and loved it and refused to give up on it. Gerald Fitch, in the last years of his life, when people asked him about his career in banking, would say that the best decision he had ever made in finance was a decision he had not made, that the best investment in the county had gone ahead without him, and that he had spent the subsequent decades trying to be worthy of the woman who had made it. He said this without embarrassment, which is how you know a man has actually learned something rather than simply learned to say the right thing. Nora, when asked about the bank, would say only that she was grateful for the door that closed, because she had not known, until it did, how many other doors there were. She said this simply, without drama, the way she said most things. She was not a woman who needed her hardships to be heroic. They had happened. She had responded to them. The response had been the important part. Now, here is what I want to say to you, before I let you go. Nora Callaway's error, if you can call it that, and I think you can, gently, was not in her numbers. Her numbers were right. Her error was in believing, for the length of time it took to walk out of a bank and drive 3 miles home and sit at a kitchen table, that the only path forward was the one that had just been closed. She had mistaken the door for the destination. She had confused the means of the thing with the thing itself. The loan was not the greenhouse. The bank's approval was not the proof of her soundness. She had spent 11 years building something real, and for one October morning she had allowed someone else's framework to make her doubt whether the real thing counted. I have told a lot of stories in my time, and this is the pattern I keep finding at the center of the ones that matter. A person who is genuinely capable, genuinely sound, genuinely ready, who encounters a gate that will not open for them, and who, in the grief of that moment, mistakes the gate for the boundary of the possible. The gate is not the boundary of the possible. The gate is just a gate. There is almost always another way through, And it is usually a way that, in the end, serves you better than the gate would have, because it requires you to build on what is actually true about you, rather than on what fits someone else's form. Don't let the arithmetic stop you. Not the arithmetic of other people's assessments, not the arithmetic of what you have been told you lack, not the careful columns of absence that someone else has drawn up to describe you. That arithmetic is not wrong, exactly. The limitations it names are real, and pretending they are not real is its own kind of foolishness. But it is measuring the wrong thing. It is counting what you don't have and calling that a complete picture of what you are. It leaves out the 11 years of spotless records. It leaves out the knowledge in your hands. It leaves out the particular genius that the people around you have been benefiting from for years without thinking to put it in a column. You are not the sum of your deficits. You are the sum of what you have built. And what you have built is more than the framework can hold. Ruth Calloway knew this. She just needed a Thursday morning and a kitchen table and a large brown dog of indeterminate heritage to remind her of it. I hope this story found you at the right moment. I hope, wherever you are listening from, that there is something warm nearby, and that the light is doing something good with whatever landscape you can see from where you are sitting. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, which is a real and valuable thing that you have chosen to spend here, and I do not take that lightly. If this story meant something to you, I hope you will carry it with you for a while, and I hope it is useful when you need it. Until next time, keep building. The South Slope is waiting.